Hi everyone, it's Olivia from Pindot Press. In today's video, we're going to learn how to make a risozine. So you've done all the cool art for your zine, and you've separated all the colors into their appropriate layers. So now you're ready to print it on a riso or work with a riso printer. But you don't know how to format all your cool art files into a zine or booklet. So in this tutorial, we're going to go over some booklet basics and also afterwards jump into a software tutorial. So just a note, many of the concepts you will learn here are applicable to making any types of booklets. So if you wanted to go to your local laser or digital printer and print your booklets there, you will be able to use the same terminology when conversing with them. Some considerations are specific to the riso because of its stencil-based printing process. So hopefully this video will be helpful to you in printing most types of booklets. Another thing to note is that this video is going to be focused more on saddle-stitched, stapled booklets and not perfect bound books. So here's an example of a saddle-stitched, stapled booklet. As you can see, it is stapled down the middle and then folded to make into a booklet. So this is an example of a perfect bound book. As you can see, it is glued along the binding edge. So this uses glue instead of staples. And there are other considerations for formatting your books for perfect binding, which we can discuss in a different video. So the first consideration when planning your booklet is that the page count should be in multiples of 4. So if I take a sheet of paper and I fold it in half, as you can see, each sheet of paper is 4 pages. So even if you have a blank page, that is still included in the page count, even though there is no art or anything on the page. So when you are requesting your printer or me for a quote, and you say, I want to print a 10-page or a 14-page booklet, I, in my head, am going to assume you actually mean a 12-page or a 16-page booklet with 2 blank pages in it. So another thing to note is that the word page means a page in the total page count and not sheet. So let me show you what I mean by that. So if you have a 20-page booklet, that means 5 sheets folded in half. So 5 sheets times 4 pages per sheet equals 20. So I just put together 5 sheets, and as you can see, here is 1, 20. So this is a 20-page booklet. So if you say 20-page booklet, I'm going to assume that your booklet is like this. It's 20 pages or 5 sheets of paper stapled and folded in half to make 20 pages, and not 20 sheets of paper stapled and folded in half to make an 80-page booklet, because that is a completely different thing. Also, regarding booklet page ordering, I am actually going to cover that in part 2 of this tutorial, because as you can see, the pages are not in numerical order because the sheets are folding on top of each other. But what I will suggest is for you to make a mock-up of your booklet before you go to final print. And in general, it's a good idea to make a cheap black and white mock-up of your booklet so that you can check it for spelling errors, for font size errors, images, things like that. And lastly, you should indicate to your printer if your final page count includes the cover. So for example, for a 20-page zine, does that mean that that is 20 pages including the cover, which means it has 16 inside pages plus another 4 pages for the cover? Or do you actually mean a 20-page booklet plus another 4 pages for the cover, making your zine actually 24 pages? So next is crop marks and bleed marks. So the crop is where your book is going to get trimmed. So it is actually going to indicate the final size of your art print, your booklet, or your zine. So the bleed mark is extending and printing your art past the crop mark to ensure that there's a little bit of a wiggle room so that when the page is trimmed, your art will go right up to the edge. If you don't provide a bleed and your art cuts off exactly at the crop or trim mark, then you run the risk of a white edge showing when your booklet gets trimmed because you've run out of artwork. So here's an example of what I mean by a white edge. So this is my Garden in Manila zine, and I had it printed by a local laser printing service. And as you can see, even though I did give them a 1/8 inch bleed in my file, they still left a white edge, leaving me to think that maybe I should have given them a wider 1/4 inch bleed, or they should have probably trimmed it so that there isn't a white edge. So a bleed is very important, not just for booklets, but also for art prints. Sometimes I'll get a file and there wouldn't be any crop or bleed marks on it, and so I wouldn't know where to trim the file or if a file should be full bleed. So it's very important to provide that information so as to take the guesswork out of the trimming process. Next is Booklet Creep. So Booklet Creep is when you fold your pages into a booklet and the pages stick out more and more as you get to the center. So as more and more sheets of paper fold over each other, the thickness of the booklet, as you can see, it takes up some of the width of the paper. So Booklet Creep affects the long edge of the booklet, and I have color-coded the long edge to illustrate this further. So as you can see, there is the Booklet Creep. So the main consideration is that you do not want to put anything important close to any of the edges. So please don't put important text or art details too close to the edge, or they might get chopped off. So as you can see, we have just trimmed the long edge so that it is nice and even. As you can see, it is very clean and very even. So now let's take a look at the creep. So here are the edges of the Booklet Creep that I have trimmed off, and as you can see, it gets progressively thicker and thicker as you get to the center. So this very thin edge is from the first page of the booklet, and as we get to the center, it gets thicker and thicker, and that, as we know, is because of the zine having a thickness. So as you can see, the center page is all the way in there, and that gets pushed out further, and therefore more of it gets trimmed off. And so if you have a word that is very close to the edge, it's quite possible that it might get chopped off, and now instead of saying hello, your word now says hell. So it's very important to not put anything important close to the edges. Last but not least is risozizing considerations. So as we have discussed in a previous video, there is a max surface print area for the riso, and that is because the ink doesn't go all the way to the edge of the screen, and also there is a size limit to the actual screen itself. And the max surface print area is a 1/2 inch smaller than a tabloid size sheet of paper, so that is 10.5 by 16.5. So in general, all full and half letter sized booklets must be sized down for the riso. So in the conventional laser printing world, booklets are either full letter sized or 8.5 by 11, or half letter sized or 5.5 by 8.5. So this is actually a half letter sized booklet. So this is 5.5 by 8.5, and this was printed using a laser printer. Now this was printed using a riso printer, and as you can see, it is not as big as a half letter sized booklet. So it's sized down, it is smaller than 5.5 by 8.5. And that is because laser printers can print up to 12 by 18 sheets, whereas the riso screen prints smaller than that.
If 10.5 by 16.5 inches is the max safe printing area, and you have a bleed, meaning you want your artwork to go all the way into the trim, you have to include the bleed in the 10.5 by 16.5. If your printer recommended bleed is the standard 1/8 inch past the trim, that means your max full-size print area is 10.25 by 16.25 inches, because when you add 1/8 inch to the top, bottom, right, and left, that makes for 1/8 plus 1/8 equals 1/4, or 0.25 inches. And 10.5 minus 0.25 inches is 10.25 inches. And same with the long edge. Which means, with bleed, a full-size booklet must be 8.125 by 10.25 inches. So to keep this simple, please just make your booklet 8 by 10 inches plus 1/8 inch bleed all around for a full-sized booklet. A half-size booklet needs to also fit in the max print area of 10.5 by 16.5 inches without bleed, and 10.25 by 16.25 with bleed. We want to fit 2 spreads to a page to save on time and cost. So to keep it simple, please make your booklet 5 by 8 inches plus 1/8 inch bleed all around. And as you can see, this is half of the full-size booklet. If you don't need bleed, meaning all your art is contained inside the page, technically you can go larger on all sides, so you can go up to 8.25 by 10.5 inches for a full-size booklet, or 5.25 by 8.25 inches for a half-size booklet. But you may not want to make it easier on yourself, or so it's easier to order packaging or envelopes for your booklets.
Alright, so I hope you enjoyed that math bit. I know I probably beat the subject matter to death, but I just wanted to show you that there is a reason for these numbers, and that is because of the Riso max surface print area size limitation. Okay, so now we're ready to jump into software. As you can see, I have all set up, so I will see you in the next video.